Hi everybody, welcome back. This is KrazyBatLady. So today I want to talk about the Stand By Me event, which is a thing in the Lantern Rite festival where you get to pick a free 4-star Liwa character. And this is really awesome, but it can be a tough choice. This is the second time it's came around, and I wanted to go over all of the characters and their usefulness at Constellation 0, and what constellations are the best for them, and what you should pick up. Just a slight disclaimer, this is of course just on some combat information, opinions, and all that good stuff. Obviously, if there's a character in here that you really like and want them, pick them over what's the most powerful. Because at the end of the day, you want to enjoy the game you want to play. So with that being said, let's jump right into this, starting with Beidou. Beidou is a very fun and useful character. She can parry and she can create basically bolts of lightning with every attack from anyone on your party. And this is very nice because it just gives you a lot of electro damage, great for a taser team. Her first constellation, however, is not so great. It creates a shield that is 16% of her max HP, and trust me, this thing is very flimsy. So I don't recommend picking this up. I do recommend picking up her Constellation 2, however, because the Stormbreaker's Arc Lightning can jump to 2 additional targets, increasing her DPS by quite a lot. So this is definitely one of her better ones. Constellation 3 increases the level of Tidecaller, which isn't bad. Her 4, even if you're running her as a main DPS, this is pretty trash, so I don't recommend picking this up either. 5 would be worthwhile because it increases the level of her ultimate, and that's where most of her damage comes from. But her Constellation 6 is also a very good pick because it reduces the electro resistance of all opponents around you, further increasing her DPS. So basically her 2, her 5, and her 6 are her best constellations. Now let's go on to Chongyun. Chongyun is kind of in a weird spot. He can place down this field, and Claymore, Sword, and Polearm users are infused with Cryo who are in it. It does not last very long, and that's kind of one of the things that bothers me about it. He also has an ultimate that just does damage. Pretty straightforward, right? Not gonna lie, his constellations are really bad. Definitely the first one is not worth picking up. And I would say the second one is not worth picking up either. But it's okay because it can reduce the cooldown time of anyone's abilities that are inside of the field. But overall, I wouldn't recommend picking any of these constellations. I'm still going to go over them though. Constellation 3 upgrades his ultimate by 3. Pretty standard. Constellation 4 regenerates 1 energy every time he hits an opponent affected by Cryo, and it can only happen every 2 seconds. This is actually very bad. 5 is also not that great because the infusion rate doesn't increase. It's just the damage when hitting with it. And Constellation 6 is probably his best one, but again, it's not as good as it sounds. You deal 15% more damage to enemies with lower percentage than you, which is nice, and also increases the overall damage of his ultimate. Next up is Ningguang. I like Ningguang a lot. Even at Constellation 0, she can be pretty powerful. Her Jade Screen deals a lot of damage, and she's really good at throwing rocks. I mean, really good at it. She also has an ability to where you can see ore on the map. And this is really useful for finding ore because you need so much of it. Now let's get into her constellations. Her first constellation turns her normal attacks into AoE, so if enemies are clumped up, you'll hit all of them at once. And it's actually pretty useful to have. And her Constellation 2 is probably one of her best constellations because you can constantly cast your Jade Screen, dealing more damage and having that passive effect up all the time. So this is really good to have. I'd recommend it. Her 3 increases her ultimate damage by 3. Also, it's okay, but there are better things you could pick. Her 4, just avoid this like the plague. It's terrible. One of the worst constellations in the game. So just skip that one. 5 is okay. Again, I wouldn't recommend picking this over, say, a new character or a stronger constellation, though. Her constellation 6 is her most powerful by far. It basically gives you a second ultimate. You cast your ultimate, and then you cast a charge attack, and it's very deadly. This is definitely one of the higher ones on the list if you want to run Ningguang as DPS or sub-DPS. So, Xinyan. Xinyan has some problems. She suffers from split scaling between defense and attack, and it makes her hard to build. Her shield is also currently bugged and has been for over a year, so I don't see it getting fixed. She's also not the best at dealing damage. I'm not saying she's terrible, I'm just saying she's not that great. Her first constellation is pretty ass. Even if you're running her as a main DPS, it's not so good. Her 2 is probably her best. 3, I don't recommend since the shield doesn't work. You can't get it to the max level. I hope they fix that sometime. Constellation 4 is okay because it decreases physical resistance, so that can be nice, but I wouldn't really slaughter on your party just for that. Of course, 5 increases your ultimate damage, and her 6 is incredibly disappointing. I tested this out. I thought it would be really strong because it sort of reminded me of Noelle's Constellation 6, but it's not that impressive. Just believe me on this. The split scaling really ruins her kit, and it's pretty sad because I like her as a character. Now, XiangLing. XiangLing, if you didn't already know, is one of the most powerful characters in the game, and you get her for free for completing the first few layers of the Spiral Abyss. She's got her Pyronado and a literal stove god to blow fire on enemies. She's really good, and Constellation 4 gives her Pyronado a huge boost in uptime. Most of her constellations are pretty good. Her first one is okay. I wouldn't say this is a must pick, but it does reduce pyro resistance when Guoba hits enemies. Her Constellation 2 is her worst one. Don't pick this up. You'll get it eventually. There's definitely better options. The Implode is not that strong, unfortunately. Constellation 3 increases the damage of her Pyronado, so this is worth picking up because you'll do more damage, obviously. And her 4, as I mentioned before, is really, really nice, and it increases the duration of her Pyronado by 40%. That's actually really huge. You'll have a lot of uptime with her ultimate if you have this constellation. I noticed a giant difference once I got it. Constellation 5 increases Guoba attack, not that important. And her 6 is pretty good because it basically gives herself a 15% pyro damage bonus and any other party member. So if you're running a mono pyro team, this is really, really great. And it's great for herself too. Now, Xingqiu is an amazing support, especially for Hu Tao or Yanfei. Basically casts his ultimate and you shoot out a bunch of swords that deal water damage off field. So really nice off field sub DPS. First constellation's nice because it increases the number of rain swords by 1. Constellation 2 is really game changing. This one is probably one of his best, and I highly recommend picking this because it decreases hydro resistance and he just does a crap load more damage. And also other party members that deal hydro damage will deal more damage as well. So it's a win-win. Constellation 3 increases the damage of Rain Cutter, which is the ultimate. So that's also not too bad. Constellation 4 is alright because you deal more damage with your elemental skill. But you have to have your ultimate up to deal the more damage. But it's not a bad constellation by any means, but it's not a must-have. Constellation 5 increases elemental skill damage, and 6 is his best constellation, I would say, because you get extra rain swords and it regenerates energy for him. Now Yanfei. Yanfei has some of the smoothest animations in the game. I like her a lot. She's definitely meant to be played as a main DPS or a support if you have the constellation that gives her a shield. She does mainly deal charge attacks for her damage. So a lot of her constellations deal with charged attacks. Her first constellation is Hard Pass. It's not as good as it sounds, because 10% just isn't enough to justify picking this. Constellation 2 is also not the best, but it can be helpful. But the enemy has to be below 50% for you to get the 20% crit raise. That's kind of the problem there. Constellation 3 just increases her elemental skill. Now the 4. Her Constellation 4 is what changes how you can play her. She turns into a shielder, and her shield can absorb up to 45% of her HP, which doesn't sound like a lot, but she can cast this a lot, and it's very helpful. Constellation 5, of course, increases her ultimate damage, which is nice, which is basically increases your charge attacks. And her Constellation 6 gives you an extra Scarlet Seal, so that you can deal even more damage with your charge attacks. Alright, now let's talk about Yunjin. She's the new character coming in 2.4, and she seems to be a support character that can buff your party's normal attack damage. She seems like she'll be pretty powerful, but we will have to see. I highly recommend picking her since she's the new character, especially if you're saving for a different banner and don't want to pull on the Xinhe or Zhao banner. Her constellations are looking pretty nice as well, other than her Constellation 1. Her Constellation 1 essentially decreases her elemental skill by 1.5 seconds or so. So that's not a lot, and I wouldn't recommend picking that one up. Her Constellation 2, however, is very strong and will further increase your party members' normal attack damage. 15% is not bad. Constellation 3, of course, increases her ultimate, so that'll make it so your normal attacks deal even more. That one's probably worth picking up as well. Her 4 increases her defense whenever a crystallized reaction happens, so this can be really nice. Definitely want to pick up the crystallization before you cast her ultimate with that. 4 increases her elemental skill, not that important. And her Constellation 6 will increase the attack speed of your characters by 12%. Now, if you pair her normal attack damage increase and that with Eula, especially if your Eula has Song of Broken Pines, you're going to be dealing so much damage. I have a feeling that this might be pretty broken, but we'll have to see. Here are my top picks. My first recommendation, and what I will most likely be picking myself, is Yunjin. Because she's a new character, she seems pretty powerful, and her constellations are looking pretty nice. Another great idea would be to get either C3, C4, or C6 on XiangLing, because she does so much damage, and this could increase your DPS potential with her by quite a good deal. C2 for Xingqiu is a must-have because it makes him so much better. Same with Beidou. Her C2 really changes the way that she plays in a good way. Ningguang C6 is a game changer for her as well. It makes her so much stronger and a lot more fun to play. And then of course C4 on Yanfei so that you can run a tank Fei build. And it's actually a pretty decent shield from what I've seen for Constellation. Anyhow, I hope that you found this video helpful. As I said at the start, this is just all my opinion. If your favorite character is on this, or a constellation for your main that you really want to pick, then pick them by all means. But these are just my personal recommendations to you. I hope that you have a great day. Happy holidays, Happy New Year, all that stuff. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you around.